want to go ahead and set up our next talk here for Fresno State, representing Fresno State for this session, but also we'll have Hung Tao in the afternoon session. I'm going to introduce Tasha Jafrida from Fresno State. And again, you saw the accomplishments and accolades in just bullet titles earlier, but you know, I can tell you just another phenomenal program. And besides the three that are represented during this morning session and the afternoon breakout sessions, there are other campuses doing amazing things. And I get tempted to, you know, point out some of them, and they're here today, but it's sort of, okay, where do I stop? I don't want to offend anybody, but, you know, we could go deeper than just these three for sure, but this is what we've selected for today. So at this point, I will turn it over, and then we will do some sort of general clarifying questions at the end, and then we'll go into San Diego State.
Thanks, Brett. So again, my name is Tasha Jafrida. I'm from the university with two names, California State University of Fresno and Fresno State. You can pick one. Just to give you a little bit of a background in terms of where our supplemental instruction program lies. Our program is under the Division of Student Affairs and Enrollment Management. From there is the Learning Center. So by title, I am the director of the Learning Center at Fresno State. We have our early alert program, which is called SupportNet. We have our supplemental instruction program, as well as our tutoring program. And the fourth thing is Grades First. So it's our student support database. And those are the four major things that fall under the Learning Center. Last year alone, so in 2015-16, we had over 8,600 student visits, 8,600 students within the Learning Center, totaling over 47,000 visits, so 47,000 touches. Over half of those were with SI alone. So even though there's those major programs, supplemental instruction definitely supports what we do within our Learning Center. Brett wanted to talk a little bit about the successes of the Fresno State program. I can tell you where we started and where we're at right now. So we have been had supplemental instruction on our campus. It started little by little before we received some substantial funding. So in the very beginning, over the last 5 years, started with the unique student visits to just under 800. Then it grew to 2004 unique students in 2012. And then when we were able to receive the funding, you can see where those unique students has increased over the last 5 years. Again, last year was our highlight with over 4,800 just in supplemental instruction. But more importantly, what I find as a pride point are the actual student visits. So it's a matter of getting the students to come to supplemental instruction, but more importantly, it's getting the students to come back to supplemental instruction, that keep them coming back. So in 2012, you can see how these numbers have grown, but the ratio of which those visits have grown, so our repeat visits hit an all-time high last year with just under 30,000. And this is what's exciting for us. It's those repeat visits. We will, I'll talk a little bit about it this morning, but more so this afternoon about why those repeat visits are critical. If you look at the data and the review of the literature, most of the time it shows 0 SI visits compared to 1 or 2 SI visits compared to 3 or more. Most of the national literature talks about 3 or more visits. But what we looked at in some of our research is it's not actually a 3 or more magic number, but we were able to break that down into students who came moderately, right, minimally, moderately, and then more frequently. And we'll show you about that data, about how that's made a difference. So we didn't start off with 30,000 visits. And as Fullerton shared, they talked about, having to have a starting point. And I referred to our starting point as our Band-Aid approach previously. So our Band-Aid approach talks of last-minute funding. We have an additional X amount of dollars this semester. Can you offer SI? Sometimes that would be during the summer prior to fall. Sometimes that would be in the second or third week of the semester. And it was like, here's some money, now go offer SI. So we're running around and scrambling. The other Band-Aid approach was coordinate supplemental instruction under other duties as assigned. So at the time, oh, you guys have done that too? Yeah, other duties as assigned. There was no release time. There was no let's take some stuff off of your plate. There was just make it happen. So that, again, this Band-Aid approach. So with this came minimal training for our SI leaders and even our faculty to understand what SI was all about. So it was a minimal training or training by fire or training from the fire hose, however you want to call it, throwing them out to the wolves. Then, of course, a theme that you will see emerge throughout the day is the fighting for space. In the very beginning, we were at the mercy of our scheduling office to release classrooms after all of the academic departments had said, okay, we're no longer offering classes or we no longer need these, and we were going to release them to our general scheduling. As I'm finding what's common on many of your campuses, it tends to be where people hoard space, right? I don't want to give it up because I might need it. And then by the time it was released, it could easily have been well into the third week of the semester. So the fighting for space is another critical component. And then finally, I call it the luck of the draw registration. So from a student's perspective, does a class have SI in it or does it not have SI? That's the luck of the draw. We'll have to see what comes up after you register for your courses. So now that we have some actual funding that we can count on year in, and we would love to get more to the money man in the corner, that stable funding really does provide an enriched experience, an enhanced experience that keeps the students coming back. Having that advanced funding provides us adequate timing to be able to plan which courses, be able to recruit SI leaders. We're already recruiting now for our courses that we're going to be offering SI in the fall. It allows us to establish those training dates and to tell those SI leaders, guess what? Don't leave the country in the month of August because you're going to be coming to training before classes start. We also have that dedicated professional staff, so it's no longer necessarily under other duties as assigned. At Fresno State, I have a full-time SI coordinator, a full-time assistant coordinator. We have an administrative support, and we also have a shared position that works 50% of the time with SI. So unlike Fullerton, we don't have faculty liaisons that have release time that work with supplemental instruction. At Fresno State, it all falls within our department. All right, so having that adequate time allows us to be able to work with explaining the processes behind this deeper understanding of learning. We don't want SI sessions to turn into just a lot of Q&A. We want to be able to share with our SI leaders the importance of what they're doing in those sessions to be able to have, again, that more enriched experience for the students. We are still fighting for space. However, we do have one dedicated classroom that's available to us especially for our large, frequently attended SI sessions. So 24 hours a day, it's available for supplemental instruction, which is fantastic. This allows us to plan ahead and to start SI on day one with some courses if needed. Next fall, we're going to have 2 dedicated spaces just for supplemental instruction. And of course, this does not nearly cover all of our SI sessions, but it's definitely a start. especially for those classes that have a historical high attendance rate, where the students are knocking on our doors once the courses start. And we also no longer have luck of the draw registration. We have been able to add a course attribute in PeopleSoft. So we have a searchable course attribute. So if a student knows they want to take a biology course and they're wondering which section offers supplemental instruction, that we have that as a searchable course attribute, and that's been very big. Previously, we were able to add it into course notes. How many of your students read the course notes? Yeah, it's like in font 2. And so the searchable course attribute has been definitely a game changer. As Brett mentioned, we have had some national accolades, which has been fantastic. It's always nice to be able to see the reaps of all the hard work of your staff and the students who work within the program. But what's interesting is that supplemental instruction, it doesn't just touch, for example, the International Center for SI. That's through UMKC. We've been able to see recognition, for example, from NACADA, so the National Advising Association, where we started actually a rotational internship in our office for graduate students to be able to get experience in a variety of work within student affairs, and that's where the NACADA piece comes into play. So what does SI look like? Very traditional UMKC model, and that we're pretty strict about, because when we talk about data, we want to make sure that we are comparing apples to apples. We target high failure rate classes, courses with high repeat rates, bottleneck courses into majors. We look at large enrollment courses. In the beginning, we were very strict when it came to the course selection. We have to have faculty support. I know Fullerton talked about that. San Diego is going to talk about it even more so in their session. But the faculty support is critical. You can't just throw in an SI leader in a course if the faculty is not going to support that type of assistance. So the faculty support is big. Also, we have the attendance is highly encouraged but not mandatory on our campus. And so in an environment where students don't do optional, what are some of the things that you can do to get your students to attend? Our SI leaders, those positions, they have specific requirements that must be satisfied. Definitely the UMKC model. But at Fresno State, I would say we are very intentional about the training and the types of training that our SI leaders have. Not just the initial training, but the continuous ongoing training and observations and feedback, so that they can make adjustments instantly versus at the end of the semester just giving a one-time review. And of course, the fact that SI targets those courses versus the students. That's definitely a big component. As I mentioned, using those course requirements as a guideline only. When I first started in this position, I was told that, well, the problem with SI is that SI works. And I thought, well, why is that a problem? I was like, well, if it was a course that was on a high failure rate list, you offered SI, but then it fell off the high failure rate list, then you'd stop offering SI. And so we changed that very quickly, that once they are a class that offers SI, we're going to keep them offering SI. So don't drop a course just because they might fall off that high failure rate class, right? In the environment, as I mentioned about how do you get students to attend when it's not mandatory? What I have found is the national average of attendance is at 40% across the nation, so 40%. You can see when we first started our small pilot programs in 2011, how each semester that has grown. Last semester, we reached an all-time high of a 50% average participation rate. So that is, of all the students who had an SI course or supplemental instruction in the courses that they were enrolled in, 50% of them chose, on average, to attend an SI session, and that was huge on our campus. I think that data has a lot to do with that. And it's important to get the data in the hands of the administrators to get the support and the financial backing, but also it's just as critical to get that data in the hands of students so that they are empowered with some of the knowledge of the benefits that supplemental instruction has. Here's another graphic. As I mentioned previously about the visits and frequency of visits, so I'll take you through this. The blue line is the average mean final grade of the courses of students who do not attend SI. And it is done through semesters, so that's why there's multiple numbers. So if we look here, this is just fall of 16. So blue line is 0 visits. The orange line are students who come 1 to 7 times during the semester. The green line is 8 to 15 times. And the red line is 16 or more times per semester. At first, when we reviewed some of this data, we thought 16 times, but that really just equates to once a week. Right? It's really not that much. When we offer supplemental instruction 2 to 3 times a week during the semester, that 16 times, even though it seems like a lot, is just a once a week. The question earlier about students' time on task and progress towards degree and how much time this might take them, really when we are continuing to push students to study that 2 to 1 ratio, right? 2 hours outside of class for every hour spent inside of class, or more importantly, with some of these STEM courses, it really should be a 3 to 1 ratio. A lot of the students that we work with, they look at you like, jaw dropped. What do you want us to do? You want us to spend how many hours outside of class? And so what we're finding is a lot of times, especially with the student population, they don't know what to do in this time that they're spending outside of class. Is it just have your PowerPoints up and kind of glancing over it? Is it talking over your notes with a friend? Those tools aren't necessarily embedded yet into their learning. And so we encourage supplemental instruction as part of that time. Being able to learn with your peers and to be able to share it. And you don't really know the material until you teach it, right? And we'll break them up into groups and have them teach each other, because that's how that deeper understanding and learning will occur. So when we look at this mean final grade for the courses, obviously the more times you come to SI, the higher grade average you're going to get. Can anyone tell who the SI leader is in any of these pictures? When we look into an SI session, if we poke your head into a session, we don't want to know to be able to visually see who that SI leader is. We want to be able to see this collaborative learning experience that's going on. Having students involved. Notice they're in circles, they're in groups, they're standing up, they're moving, they're active, they're not sitting. They're not just looking at a whiteboard, right? It's that collaborative learning, that deeper understanding, working on projects, putting together study sheets, practice exams, reviewing the material. HIPS, high impact practice, the buzzword of the year, of the decade probably. So the high impact practices, how do you know that SI is a high impact practice? Well, there's a ton of data. As Brett mentioned, SI is not a new phenomenon. This has been around for quite some time. There is a great deal of data out there about how SI works and how it raises these course grades and course completion rates. But what we have also found is that supplemental instruction reduces, sometimes eliminates, and actually sometimes reverses the achievement gap when it comes to that course passing rate. That's big, especially with the the graduation initiative. And administrators are wondering, how in the world are we going to do that? guess what? We already have the answers. We just need to figure out how to really make it stick. So this is something that does work with the achievement gap. We're also doing some preliminary data where we're finding it increases timely graduation rates. Kind of makes sense. You pass the course, you don't have to repeat it. You should be able to graduate in a more timely fashion, right? So, but actually finding the data that shows it, not just saying we know this is really good, we know it's working. Well, now with our administration and with our legislature and funding and everything else, they're going to want to know, show us. So having that data. And the fourth thing, as it was touched upon earlier, is the impact that it has on our SI leaders. And the high impact practice of student employment is critical, but this is a student employment opportunity that doesn't just provide students a paid position on campus. This is a student employment opportunity that provides leadership development, provides many of them with the ability to get a deeper understanding within their own field, to groom our future professors and researchers. So having that enriched student employment is also, I had a faculty member once who said, oh, I don't have SI in my class just because it helps my students. I really like working with the SI leader. I feel like I'm mentoring that person and grooming that person. So that was really interesting too. So a little bit about a research project that we had done, and we go with that whole theme of data drives decisions. We looked at a large study of over 16,000 students that were enrolled in 22 courses offering supplemental instruction between 2011 and 2014. In particularly, we wanted to look at the impact SI had on traditionally disadvantaged students. And we looked at 4 different factors. We looked at underrepresented minorities, Pell eligibility, first generation students, and students who entered needing to remediate. So those, what we called, were 4 disadvantaged factors. And what we found of those 16,000 students at Fresno State, 50% had 3 or more disadvantaged factors. 50%, 3 or 4 disadvantaged factors. So we're a traditional college student. You got to get into college and rise up. With this student population, they're having to climb a hill that looks a little bit like this. So when we look at a high impact practice, we have a huge group of students here that we can reach with supplemental instruction, because what we found, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in our session this afternoon. I have Hung Tao as our senior research analyst who worked on this project, and he is our Tableau master and can speak data a lot better than I can speak data. But what we found is the mean predicted course grade of the students with these disadvantaged factors. So as you're looking at this graph, this top one are students with 0 factors, okay? So 0 disadvantaged factors. The bottom one, of course, are the students with 4 disadvantaged factors. And remember, 50% of the students have 3 or 4 disadvantaged factors. So without supplemental instruction, those students predicted to not pass those courses. That's below a 2.0. So unless it was a class where D was done and not D equals do-over. So what we looked at is, okay, how about students who attend SI minimally, right? So they only attend 1 to 7 times, it's a minimal visit. What you can see, the sharpest benefit, the students who absolutely gained the most, are the students with the more disadvantaged factors. So although SI benefited all students, it really, really benefited the students with the more disadvantaged factors. But as we know, we don't want you to only come once, twice, 3 times. We want you to keep coming. So let's look at the students who came what we refer to as moderately, 8 to 15 times. That's moderately. So when we looked at that, look what happened. It jumped over the line, across the bridge. So now we have all students with a 2.0 or above. So all students with a mean predicted course grade of a 2.0 or above. And where we really like seeing the data are those students who come frequently. Those students where SI is built into their schedules, their routine, being able to come once a week, not just before a midterm grade or a final exam. And notice where that jump is. That gap is closing. So being able to see those different 4 disadvantaged factors, again, the greatest benefit were for those students. The more disadvantaged the student was, the greater the benefit supplemental instruction had. I know you can read the numbers on that previous slide, so I'll show you that one. All right, so if you want to learn more and talk numbers, we are presenting on the getting quality data to demonstrate the impact of supplemental instruction in the Coronado room. I might have time for one question.
From our online audience.
Right.
The question is from, hang on a second, from Christine Connerly. I'm not sure what campus you're from. Chico, thank you. Is the person who analyzed their data in your department?
No.
Because this is excellent information for every program to have.
Definitely, yes. No, I would say just as critical as building those relationships with faculty, if not more critical, is building those relationships with the Office of Institutional Effectiveness. It was one thing when we would do data on our own. Once you bring in those relationships with the people who are certified and know those numbers inside and out and can run all the statistics stuff, that's when you really, get some validity behind what you're doing. So yes, Office of Institutional Effectiveness and Hung Tao's with me. He'll be presenting with me this afternoon.
Great, and Christine and others online, hopefully you already know that their slides from the afternoon session are also in that packet you have a link to. Great, thank you so much, Tasha.